After years of service in the United States Army, Mike Duffy was eager to transition into a career that offered a similar sense of pride and camaraderie. He found that in public works. He currently serves as the Assistant Public Works Director for the City of Cedar Rapids in Iowa.
That job doesn't end at the end of the day. Things are continue outside of that work day, and so trying to find a balance for that was something that we struggled on as a couple early on in our relationship.
Serving something bigger than yourself always comes at a cost, and for Mike and countless other public workers, that cost extends to the home and family life.
People depended on me, people depended on him, and one of us had to be taking care of our daughters. Ultimately, that's the priority, but it was a power struggle.
That was Janis Duffy. She's Mike's spouse and a dedicated public servant in her own right. She's been working with the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services foster care unit for nearly 3 decades. It's been far from easy, but Janis and Mike have found a way to balance the volatile demands of their careers with maintaining a healthy marriage and raising 2 amazing daughters. In a 2025 APWA Reporter article, Janis wrote powerfully about this experience and the values that a career in service can instill in your kids. I mean, how many grade schoolers these days can appreciate the horsepower of a bobcat?
My daughter, the youngest, was always pointing out pieces of equipment. She knew, what a bobcat was, and what an excavator was, and what they were used for. And so we would drive down the road, and she'd be pointing those out.
And of course, with the demands and sacrifice so ingrained in public works, there's challenges, trade-offs, sleepless nights, especially in times of emergency response.
Mike has told me when things are going well at home, we're communicating, he can focus on the job at hand. He knows things are taken care of. He can keep his eyes and his focus on what needs to be done.
Janis and Mike are going to outline several great ways to build support systems that promote healthier home lives for everyone touched by a career in public works.
Somebody that you could go to and say, what is this like? What am I going to be dealing with? How can I better cope with things? What strategies can I do? I think that would make families stronger too and be able to help support their person that is in public work.
Yeah, similar to the military. The military does a lot of that, when people are deployed and they get together as a community. The bigger that support bubble that you have, the better off that the employee is going to be.
Welcome back to Public Works Radio, the official voice of the American Public Works Association. I'm your host, Bailey Dickman, and we're back for the second half of Season 1. This episode is all about family. The public works industry could not work without the dedicated public servants within it. And we don't talk about the impacts that it has on their families often enough. That's why we're doing this episode. We couldn't have landed 2 better, more honest voices to take us on this journey. Let's jump in. Janis, in your reporter article, I think you mentioned sort of like the negotiations between who would go to work, who would stay home with the kids. Can you tell us more about those early negotiations?
Those were difficult times at the beginning. I didn't know that much about public works. I didn't know what it all entailed. So when the girls were sick or the daycare was closed, usually it fell on me. Mike and I would talk about what should we do? And he was needed to be at work and they expected him to be there. And if it was an emergency, like a snow emergency, he needed to be there to help run staff and the crews. And he couldn't do that if he was at home. Try and decide what was most important, who was best benefit to go to work, who was going to be staying home with the kids that day. It was usually me. We had some really hard, not very good conversations on handling that. But that's what.
Yeah, and I guess from my perspective, it was, Janis works in a very critical field. I mean, the foster care is very important work. I mean, there's people that rely on her as well, and so it became a really difficult balance for us. And so, where we would shake out those conversations a lot of the time was just on, during a snow event, when traffic's not advised. Maybe those are the better times for me to work my way into the office. But on the cleanup side of things, when I had a little bit more flexibility, that's when I would try and get out of the office, and then she would go in. So we really tag teamed it in our careers to be able to still be successful and get the work done that's important. The people that are relying on her, the people that are relying on me. And I think that balance, once we found it, it really worked well.
How long did it take you to find that balance?
It's interesting 'cause I think we started, when I met Janice, we actually met at the police academy. So we both had an interest in law enforcement and went to the Cedar Rapids Police Academy. We met there. And so we both were kind of had a very similar mindset of in the service to community and where we really wanted to have a career. And so she ended up ultimately in foster care and I ended up in operations within public works. So it was very easy for us both to sort of understand. I think the struggle was really, well, then, who has to wait on us that particular day. I'd changed jobs within my career, so when you're not on the front line of a winter operations, it's a little easier to have a lot more flexibility. And I think we both found that in our careers, but it probably took 10 to 15 years before we got to a place where we had the flexibility to be able to make some decisions about who went into work and who didn't.
I would agree with that. I think it took us years to get there. People depended on me, people depended on him, and one of us had to be, taking care of our daughters. Ultimately, that's the priority, but it was a power struggle. Every time there was an event, the kids were sick. At one point it seemed like they were sick every week, and I thought I was going to lose my job. It's like I can't be gone all the time. And so that created a lot of conflict with us.
Has that like balance kind of changed as your daughters have grown up and could drive themselves to school or something like that?
Definitely. They became more independent. You could leave them at home for longer periods of time. There was more flexibility in our work schedules. I think early on, I don't think employers were as sympathetic, especially in, Mike's work. He was expected to be there. Things got better as they got older and they were able to take care of themselves. And even when Mike's dealing with emergencies and disasters, we have a better understanding of how things work now.
Yeah, I think the other shift was as they got older, the time shifted a little bit. So, there's a lot of activities in the evening, and things like that. So it wasn't, if they could stay home by themselves during the day, that was one thing. But they still had, that school event at night that, I would miss. I think one of the things that when Janis was working on the article that she did, that was hard for me to hear is when the kids start talking about, dad missing this or dad missing that. There's certainly some guilt associated with that. They've really let me off the hook though. I mean, they understand it. They know, there is no 9 to 5, the roads are still out there. People are still using them. There is no time clock, for public works professionals. I mean, we leave, but we still have to be able to find that balance. And it always seems like those events, those emergencies, they always occur sort of on at night or on a weekend, Christmas morning, that kind of thing. So they've really been good about it. And I think it's really shaped them as they've grown up as well.
Are there like values from public works that have influenced you as a family or have influenced your girls as they've grown up?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they know what it takes to, build a road. I mean, I think they get sick and tired of hearing me talk about those sort of things sometimes, but I'm not with them all the time, but when I do, I know they recognize, construction zones and slowing down because they know those people that are working there have a family that they're wanting to go home to. They value holidays and family time because they know that they haven't always had that, and there's times when we've had to do and rush through, opening gifts so that somebody can go to work, one of us, and so I think it's had a big influence on them and who they are today.
Have you ever, brought the kids to work with you, brought them to, a touch a truck or like a public works event? And like, what was their reaction if they got to see what you did every day?
They would go into the office. My daughter, oldest actually, worked in public works for a while as a seasonal, in the traffic area and gained further appreciation for it there. During flood events, we'd bring them in, to a sandbag stations. My daughter, the youngest, was always pointing out pieces of equipment. She knew, what a bobcat was, and what an excavator was, and what they were used for. And so we would drive down the road and she'd be pointing those out. But then they've also gotten into the situation, where people sort of know that dad works in public works, and so they'll bring home sometimes a list of areas that maybe need attention, things like that.
Yes, our one daughter would say that people would say to her, "Hey, can you tell your dad, that this needs to be fixed?" Or I had when people would ask me, what I did and then what my husband did, as soon as they found out he worked in public works, then they would start saying, "Hey, I'm having this problem with my road," or "This happened to me." It it's like public works did, it just carried over into everything. And when they found somebody that they knew that worked in that line, they wanted to state their concerns.
Despite the challenges, the Duffys look back fondly on their role as a pillar of the community and what that meant to their family as their daughters grew up.
It was pretty neat because during the winter times, the kids could see that truck going around town, and that built like a sense of community, tied to the community, ownership, just a real sense of
Pride, I guess.
pride.
That she had a part of that, because they put their hands in the paint and then put it on the plow. So they actually had a hand in it. They're actually on the plow.
And there were times like, I really liked that Mike's work did trick or treating down at Public Works. So he would bring our daughter down there with some of her friends, and they would go around the building and get to know the people that Mike worked with in the different areas. And that,
Yeah.
that gave a sense of where dad goes and who he's with throughout the day, and a greater connection. And when he would bring them down to work, sometimes he would let them get into the equipment, when they had open houses, get in the equipment, see how big it is. And just, it just kind of ties things more together of what Mike does each day and what Public Works does, and the people that work there do.
Mike, you mentioned that your oldest worked in public works for a time as like a seasonal. Did your kids show an interest in following a similar career path to either of you? Are either of them following in your footsteps?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think they picked up the service component of it, absolutely. I think they were, a little afraid of sort of some of the impacts, I think, maybe on the family, because they went a different career path ultimately. My oldest became a teacher, and because she really wanted to do that portion of working with kids and family, and there's a lot of service in that as well. And then our youngest really got into like the esthetician, so doing services and things like that for people and being able to help people and that have skin issues and things like that. So I think it's been ingrained in them. But neither one of them are sitting in a piece of equipment this morning. I can tell you that much. But in addition to that, though, my daughter has been married a couple of years. Her husband has seen it. He's actually got an interest and has recently expressed an interest in going to work for Public Works. So it's it's in our blood for sure. So it's a family thing.
You also mentioned your kids would like point out pieces of equipment as you were, going down the road. How did they react when they were kids, when they saw, a road, a park, a community project, like something that you helped make?
Well, our daughter told us that a lot of times Mike would take them out on projects. He would go check roads like in the evenings or on the weekends, and he would take them along. And she said she remembers getting out of the car and dad would be looking at the road and kind of explaining how the road was made and what went into it. Or there was other times when it was snowing. We've got pictures of the snow is, I don't even know how, it's above the car, and we're standing in the middle of the road, and Mike would take us out to roads and see, what the road conditions were like and what it takes to plow those and the people that are doing that job, instead of just sitting at home and not really knowing what goes all into it.
And they're not all good stories, though. I remember my Janice had gotten a new vehicle at one point, and I was out driving with her, and we decided that we would maybe take a detour to one of our construction projects, and I was just showing her what it is that we were working on. And as we're driving down the road, a piece of debris, rock, flew up in the air, hit the windshield, and cracked it. And I don't know that I've ever heard the end of that one. So, that was one of those days where it's like, do we have to come on a construction project on the weekend, kind of thing, But it's like it happens. But yeah, they've always. I think the thing that it was important for me to let them know that these are regular people working out on these roadways with families, and what they're doing is really important work. I mean, I try and stress that with our staff as well. We never hear somebody saying thank you. You saved my life, or you saved me quite a bit of property damage. But you certainly hear about the things that don't go right. And so, I mean, I am just confident. I just know that the work that they're doing out there on the roadways within Public Works is saving people's lives. It's saving injury, property damage, and those are the things that just never really that get brought out. The Obviously, when we have flooding and when we respond to other types of weather events, and snow, or we had a derecho here, which is a knockdown event with a number of trees. People recognize the work you're doing. Then they don't always see the day to day, and it's just as important.
What role does a family play in supporting, public works pros, especially during storms, emergencies, special events?
I think we play a very vital role. Mike has told me when things are going well at home, we're communicating. He can focus on the job at hand. He knows things are taken care of. He can, you know, keep his eyes and his focus on what needs to be done. So, but if things aren't going well with us, then they're probably not going very well at work, and it creates a lot the greater stress for him. So, I think we play a very vital role in that. We typically will pick up the slack. I will try and give it encouragement, ask him what he needs done.
Well, I hope it goes both ways too. I mean, she's right. I mean, I really rely on that. If things are, happy wife, happy life. I guess. I mean, I try and find a happy husband, somehow version to that, but it just never quite rolls off the tongue the same way. But it's true. Like, when I'm at work and I know things are good with us and with our family, it really allows me to focus on that. But part of that is me sharing. And so when I come home, I'm not always in the mood to talk about things. If I've been working on something or that just is very stressful, or a response to an emergency, and I'm worried about things. Sometimes I need some time. Janice has been really really good about picking up on that. I do the same for her. I know when she's got things on that stress her out, she's a little different in the sense that she likes to talk about those things, and so I provide that ear. For me, sometimes it's just I just need to let it go, and that's hard to do in public works. It's you those things like I mentioned earlier. They don't stop at the end of the day. I mean, people are still driving the roads, the snow's still falling, and people expect us to respond, but relying on each other, being able to help each other out and pick up the slack. Having the kids be able to help out now that they're a little bit older has been very helpful as well. And they do that readily because they understand the importance of both of our jobs in service to the community.
And I think if you know what's going on by our communication, if I know he's dealing with a lot, it makes it easier for me to understand when he's quiet, to give him space, to not take it personally, and to know that, that this is just kind of a season and we'll get through this.
Do you think there's something that public works agencies or like a public works director could do to help the public workers like better support their families or better make things easier for public works families?
Yeah, we try to do that. I mean, one of the things that we do is we do like nights at the ballpark and things because the bigger your that support bubble that you have, the better off that the employee's going to be. If they got people that can help them out, we've got a lot of different situations, a lot of different looks to what family is, and what that really the stresses that are placed on that. If we get together within Public Works and we're at the ballpark and somebody meets somebody else, and the next thing you know, it's like, well, I could help out with letting the dogs out or whatever it is. I mean, those sort of things strengthen the community. It strengthens our workplace, and then it strengthens the family as well. I mean, just being able to have those relationships is very important. So. In our organization, we stress that a lot. We really spend a lot of time during Public Works Week with different things. It's a week-long event. We're doing everything from mini golf to bags to, bringing families in to be able to spend time together. We do a Christmas in July kind of thing where we're at the ballpark and, the families are there and able to spend time together and get to know each other a little bit better. And those building those relationships is great.
When we got into public works, I felt very alone. Like I didn't have anybody to talk to. I didn't realize what public works all would entail. I always thought that maybe public works should have some sort of like mentorship, somebody that you could go to and say, what is this like? What am I going to be dealing with? How can I better cope with things? What strategies can I do? I think that would make families stronger too, and be able to help support their person that is in public work.
Yeah, similar to the military. The military does a lot of that, when families, people are deployed and they get together as a community more, I think, than it's something we're trying to develop in Public Works, but I think we're a little bit behind on that. And a little bit of that is because, it's a lot of it ends up being seasonal. I mean, it's not every night that you've got a situation like this, or every weekend that you're having a snow event. But when it happens, we've been in situations within Cedar Rapids where, when we had a derecho knockdown event of trees back in August of 2020, we recovered from that the entire summer. So our staff was working, sun up to sundown, and we did it every weekend until the trees were cleaned up, and that was a huge impact on families. I mean, there's probably vacations that didn't happen, and there's just a lot of those impacts that a lot of the public didn't see. They just wanted the trees cleaned up as fast as possible.
If you could share one message to Public Works families specifically, like those who are supporting their family member, their loved one, their brother, their husband, their wife, their sister in Public Works, what would that message be?
I think the biggest thing is communication, talking to each other, asking how their day is, what's been the positive, what's been the negative, what you can do to help. Just being able to support each other in everything that you do. I think also getting involved, getting to know your spouse's coworkers, getting to know the people that he's with every day. They're a team, but the family is also a team too. So I think it's important to bridge both of those, and also to find balance, have a balance between work and your family life.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of those. I mean, I think she's exactly right. The communication and the getting involved. I mean, it's easy to say I'm going to leave, work at work, but it's also, I think there's a balance between that as well, and being able to include your family in that, being able to include other families in that, gain a better understanding of what the professionals within Public Works are experiencing and dealing with. But then I'd also really encourage, and I do with our staff, to encourage our Public Works professionals to really understand what it is that what they're doing and what the impact is on their family. And so being able to manage that better, if they don't recognize that them being gone from the house is having an impact on their relationship and then their family, then they're really missing the mark on that. So they need to know and find ways of dealing with that. And within Public Works, I think one of the things that we do is we encourage those behaviors. We encourage people to make good use of their time. Take vacations when you can, schedule things, spend the time that you have today while you have it. It's very valuable. And then we also encourage people to within our staff to really plan for what their future looks like. And, you're making sacrifices now, but those should all, having a plan for how that pays off in the future and being able to develop real close family relationships are important.
Any last thoughts you'd like to share about Public Works, the family, that sort of symbiotic relationship?
I think the other thing is, on both sides, Mike has encouraged me to come to conferences, I think coming to a conference really opened up my eyes. The first time I went was to North Carolina at PWX, and I really got a full grasp of what Public Works was like. I loved hearing the president up there talking about, his wife coming and being a part and being alongside him, because he was where he was partly because of her. And I think that just opens people's eyes to what Public Works is all about. You see the equipment, you do the networking, it just was really eye-opening for me. I think, like I said, it really just pulled it full circle for me what Public Works is all about. And I think also, getting involved. I got to know Mike's coworkers, would help try and set up like the Christmas party. Being able to get involved, I think makes a big difference.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because when I go to a conference early on, it was just another event that took you away from the family. That changed when I started and had the opportunity to bring Janis along to these conferences. We almost turned it into a little mini vacation. It was a time for us to get away and spend some time together. After a while, it didn't take very long because she's very outgoing personality, but people got to ask, where is Janis? I mean, it wasn't, I think she's more popular at these conferences than I am. They people like to see her, and I think that's fantastic. She's spoke at a number of conferences now, not just at the national level, but really involved at the state level as well. And that is just another way that it just makes things a lot easier on me because she's a part of it. We're doing it together.
Thank you for listening to Public Works Radio, the official voice of the American Public Works Association. And a special thank you to today's guests, Janis and Mike Duffy. Check out Janis's reporter article in the description of this episode, and make sure you subscribe to Public Works Radio wherever you get your favorite podcast. Rate it, review it, and forward us along to a friend. And don't be shy about dropping us a note over at podcast@apwa.org so we can hear your feedback directly. We'll catch you next time.